Hey everyone, it's Dane again. Today we are on part 2 of our WiiDual install. Today we're going to be working on the electronics, installing the actual mod board, and doing all the fun stuff. So anyway, let's get to it. Okay, so here we have our Wii motherboard, and today we are going to be preparing the RGB lines first. So we need to remove the components from these 3 areas, as well as a couple components from here, since we are using data pin 15 for our sync signal. So that will be the first thing that we get to. Okay, so I have my camera pulled in pretty close here, because these components are actually like really small. So it's actually a little bit tricky for me to get my camera close enough to show you the components, but I will do my best. So first thing we need to do is prepare our RGB lines and our sync line. And we are going to be using these lines here. Now, a lot of times for this mod, you would be using this line up here to basically use composite sync, but we want to do C-Sync on our pin 15 for data. So we are going to remove our components from these areas, and there's a couple more that I need to remove down here. And I will actually pull up the page and I'll show you the stuff that we need to remove. Okay, so I've pulled up the installation instructions, and you can see here that it says, if you choose composite video for C-Sync, you must also remove components highlighted in blue. That is the top one. That is not what we want to do. It says the components highlighted in yellow must be removed no matter which choice is picked. So those are these 3 pins here that I initially showed. And then since we are using pin 15 for C-Sync, then we also need to remove these components highlighted in red here. Let me pull that up. Get us in a little bit closer. So it looks like there are 2 very small components there right next to that surface mounted capacitor that we are also going to need to remove. All right, let's get to work. So first thing I'm going to do is add some flux to these components here. And I'm just going to use the old method of flooding those with solder to remove those bits. Sorry, I'll do my best not to hit the camera. I have it really low to try to make it actually visible to see what I'm doing. So I may have to adjust some things some more, but I will do my best. This is tricky to get in and out of here. Oh yeah, I need to turn on my fume extractor. Okay, there's our first batch of components all pulled off. It's really not too bad to do. I just kind of flood it with solder and pull those SMD components right off. Let's go ahead and clean that area up just a little bit. Okay, now I don't see any bridges. Okay, that all looks pretty good. Now let's see about moving these other 2 components as required for pin 15. Double check, make sure I'm looking at the right ones. Yep, these are very, very small components I'm working with here. Alright, there's one. This next one's going to be tricky. You got to be a little more surgical with it. There we go. We will clean that area up as well. Yeah, that is some small components there. So you can see the 5 pads there that are just above where it says R55. Immediately to the right of that 16 volt capacitor there. All right. now we get into the fun stuff. Okay, so let's place our mod board on here and see how it's going to fit over our pins. By the way, I've flipped the board over and we are looking at the port out. This will be the actual analog port here, and this is where we will be setting up our RGB out. So yeah, looking here, this almost sits flat already. Does look like we're going to need to do a little bit of solder removal around some of these pins just to make sure that it does sit fully flush, but it is darn close already. Actually, I'm not even really sure we're going to need to remove anything. And that is, yeah, you know, the more I'm looking at this, the more I think it's going to basically be set. So I don't think we need to do any of the sort of painstaking solder removal with solder wick through here. I think that's going to be, that's good to go already. Pull that back off. Set it aside. Let's go ahead and move our board. I'm kind of using the heatsink to help balance it, but I want to show this portion here, because this is where our HDMI board is going to sit. Right in there. And that, you know, that already basically sits flat as well. So I think as long as I basically get that positioned like so, we will be all set. But before we get putting those in, we need to get our ribbon cable set up. So that is going to revolve around this chip right here. And I do have this pulled in about as close as I'm going to be able to get it. But this is where we are going to hook up our flex cable. So grab that out kit here. And this actually looks a little bit different than the cable that Dan was using in his installation video for this. So it looks to me like they have basically made it so you no longer need to pull this C43 component right here, because there is now a hole in this cable. Yeah, this is going to be a very critical component here. We need to get that lined up perfectly. And that right there is on. So as you can see, even just like lifting my fingers up moves this. In fact, it's almost easier for me to just look at the screen here and see where I've positioned it. So what's going to have to happen is I'm going to have to pre-tin my iron, sort of get this exactly where I want, and then tack it down, and then from there adjust things as needed. But before I do all that, I'm going to go dig and see what I can find out about this newer flex cable, and just make sure that yeah, I don't need to mess with this small component here. I don't think they would have cut that hole out otherwise, but I want to do my due diligence, so I'm going to go check that out now. Okay, I did a little bit of searching. Weirdly, the only place I found the information about that C43 cap was in the comments on the YouTube video of Dan's install of this, where just the comment said, hey, don't remove it. So that is how I'm going to operate right now. I think that's going to be fine. And you can see that I more or less have this cable put into the correct position here. So I'm going to load up my iron, and actually I'm going to drop the temperature just a little bit. I think I want this right around 310, and I usually have it set about 350 C. So we're going to drop that temperature back down to 310 C. Okay, first things first, a little bit of flux and a very small amount of solder. You do not want to go flooding all these pins. You don't want to have to remove a bunch and use like desoldering braid on your flex cable. I don't think that would be a fun time. Yep, just putting the smallest amount I can get away with on there. And you know, I think I might even switch out my tip. I almost exclusively use this chisel tip And I am just not convinced that that is the best tip for the job on this one. So I'm gonna go ahead and try not to burn myself here, and I think I will pull it with my pliers. Kind of like the look of this. This one looks pretty similar to the one that Dan used in his videos. So let's try this one out. See. Very small amount of solder, lots of flux. Gonna be relying on my flux for this. Okay, well, way to just knock the thing off there already, Dane. Okay, well, I've made a fine mess of things up there. We're just gonna let that sit, and let's move around and try these pins here first. Okay, I think those two are looking pretty good, actually. Some fine pitch stuff here. Let's get some more flux on here. Not worried about those bridges right now. We're just trying to move that solder around. Looking better already. Alright, adding just a tiny bit more flux, or a lot more flux, tiny bit more solder. So what I'm doing right now is cleaning off the end of my brush and trying to sort of pull some of that solder back onto my iron and just remove it slowly that way. Okay, I'm gonna actually flip the board around so I can hit this top end. I'm gonna let that side cool down a bit, and then I'll double back and work that area some more. All right, I think that may have done it. I'm going to clean this up a bit. Do it kind of gently. So you don't want to go too hard on these flex cables. Now this side over here, this right side, I'm not super thrilled with it. It's not terrible or anything, but it is a little bit cockeyed. So I'm actually going to test continuity on that. Just to make sure that those pins are not bridged. Nothing wrong with doing your due diligence on something like that, because I certainly don't want to have to try to pull this flex cable. I just want to make sure that it is doing what it's supposed to. Okay, that does appear to be bridged. Well, actually, yep, okay, those are bridged. Okay, well, that seems to be a bit of a disaster over there. So let's work on a little bit of cleanup. Actually, move that to a little bit better area now. Okay, those two pins are not bridged. Neither are those. Okay, that is correct. That is correct. Okay, no bridge there so far. That is correct. Okay, good. Checking our fourth pin from the left. That is all good. Does not bridge with pin 3. Let's check out pin 5. Okay, I think we are all set. So stuff like that, you just have to not panic. You know, sometimes with stuff that small, it can actually be really difficult to even tell. You know, it might look like something is bridged when it maybe necessarily isn't. Let me get out my magnifying glass here. We'll see if I can get us in a little bit closer on what we're looking at there. This is so tricky to get in there properly. Okay, so I think that our third pin here may not actually be hooked up. Weird, it says that it is there. Ah, there we are. Okay. Alright, so far so good. Let's check this side. Alright, everything looks good there. I do have to flip this. One more quick check. But I think that our flex cable, is good to go. Alright, we are all set. Moving on. Okay, so next up we want to place our board in position. And we can see how this is going to line up with the flex cable that we just installed. Alright, I need to adjust my support here. It's actually very helpful to use the heatsink on the underside as a support for this. Okay, so I just want to make sure that my board can lay flat, won't get hooked up on anything. Yeah, that looks good. Yeah, I looked out. I don't really need to pull any solder. Okay, let's get our board installed. So we're going to start here and just hook up one pin. That way, if we need to adjust anything, we can. And I'm actually going to increase the temperature on my iron back up to where I usually like it at about 330. I used to run it at 350. I think in that 330 to 350 neighborhood is pretty good. Yeah, we're sitting flush. Oh yeah, there's the smallest little button right here. I think that's for the infrared. I think there's our receiver for a remote and a button right there. I think that's what that is. Let me check this other. Yeah, I believe that's what that is. Keep an eye on this as we're working on it. Yeah, but otherwise, I think we just need to get this all welded into place. So let's do that right now. Just fluxed it up. sorry for bumping the camera there. Again, these quarters are pretty tight here. Alright, looking solid. Let's go ahead and rotate our board, and then we will hit the sides from our flex cable. Okay. This looks pretty straightforward. Okay, lots of bridges there. We're just gonna hit it with more flux. Pull the rest of that off. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm gonna hit it one more pass just to make sure it's all nice and clean, exactly the way I want. Alright, looks good. Okay, so the next area we are going to hit is going to be our HDMI port. For this one, we just really want to make sure we get it lined up nice and straight so our port will sit right exactly where we want. And there are a couple good things you can use as a reference on this. So you kind of want the edge of your board and the edge, ultimately the edge of your port, to line up parallel with this edge here. And you can see this white line here. We want the front of this to line up with that. So the way that I'm going to do this basically is to hit one of these big circular joints here, that then in case I need to move things around, I can for anchoring the rest into place. And that looks pretty darn good. Yeah, that looks good and straight. So go ahead and weld the rest. Let's do it. Okay. So our HDMI port is now hooked up. It looks pretty good. There's a couple more anchor points on the main board that we need to hit as well. You can see there's a big one right here. All right, that looks good. I think maybe there's one more. Ah, yeah, right here. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do with this board is make sure that we do our jumpers correctly. Something I forgot on the GameCube, and I had to pull the whole darn thing back apart to get back to it. And our jumpers are right here, 1, 2, and 3. Now, since we're using pin 15 for our sync, I believe that means we need to bridge 1 and 2. Let me check here. Yep, on dansprojects.com/WiiDual_install.html, it says data pin 15, short pads 1 and 2. All right, so right here are our pads. All there we go. Pads 1 and 2 are now bridged. I got a tiny bit of solder on pad 3, but there is no continuity there near as I can tell. But I can always use my multimeter to double check. Let's see what we got. All right, pad 3. Yep, no continuity. Okay, so that is basically installation of all of our boards. They are all good to go now. So the last thing that we need to do is hook up our line for our on-screen display and then run our flex cable between our two boards here. So let's go ahead and hook up our line. Okay, so access for our controller port 1 is up here, and the pad that we are going to be welding to is TP27, which is this point right here. So we need to prepare that. All right, the pad is now ready. And we also need to prepare our board, and that should be this pad right here. There we go. It's like a healthy tinned pad ready to go. Let's see here. All right, this is a black Wii, so I'm gonna use black wire. Just gonna tin my my stranded wire here. Now, Dan recommended, Dan the creator of this, recommended using at least 28 gauge stranded wire. He's saying that anything much smaller than that, you may or may not get a good signal to your controller. And actually, I need to rotate my board this way, just because of the way that I like to do this. In fact, go one more turn, like so. That'll let me come at it here. And actually, looks like that's just a little long. No big deal. We don't really want like a bunch of extra, hanging over the pad, so I'm going to trim that up. I'm also going to pre-tin my iron. Now, I always like to hook up the wire to whatever the largest pad is first. That with just a little more flux. I just have a little bit of a point on there that I don't want. There we go. I like the look of that. Okay. So our run is basically going to come up like so. So my camera is pulled in really tight. So I'll actually kind of show you how I tend to do my wires. So you can see I've got a wire that's longer than I need for my whole run. So I kind of just sort of guide it to the position that I want. And once I find that, then what I do is sort of mark with my finger just on the other side of the pad that I want. So I'm gonna cut this line just on the other side of this. Okay, my wire is now cut to length. Strip it and tin it, and then we will get that hooked up. Okay, wire is tinned up. I need to trim it. Alright, I'm gonna adjust my board so I can get where I want. Okay, I've got my board rotated around where I usually like it, and now I'm going to weld to this point right here. Sometimes this can be kind of tricky on these small pads like this. I've just found that put a liberal helping of solder on your soldering iron and just hold your wire just on the other side of where you are soldering to. Just like that. Okay, not too bad. That wire is out of the way. One of the things anytime you're doing a wire run, you always want to make sure that you aren't getting in the way of any of the holes that hold your board in place. All right, so now we need to hook up our flex cable. Okay, so we are going to do our cable run from this point on our main board up to this point on our HDMI board. So we're going to just push up on the connector here. There we go. Get up a flex cable. Now there is a kind of a particular way you have to origami this flex cable to do the run properly. So first things first, we want our blue side facing up. That is our pin side facing down, like so. Run that in there. Okay, we are in place. Okay, so our ribbon connector there, our flex cable is hooked in. I'm gonna adjust this board down just a little bit so we can get a good idea for this next run. So the way that Dan described it in his video is that basically we want to bend the cable this way, and we actually want to get it lined up parallel with this line here. And when you do this, you don't want to go real hard on your flex cable. You just want to give it just enough pressure. You want to go real hard on it. Just press down lightly to get that bend properly. Now, here you can see that our pins are facing up, which means that we need to then loop this back under to get it to properly interface with our next socket over here. And so for this, we just want to fold this cable back around on itself, like so. All right, this is going to be tricky for me to do without getting in the way of the camera too much, but I will do my best. All right, so using our fingernails, we're going to pop up this connector, and we're just going to run this connector in. Sometimes these can be kind of stubborn. If you use, sorry for bumping the camera, if you use something to help, make sure that you aren't going to damage anything as you try to use it to guide it into place. Okay, that is slid in, so now we are going to keep pressure on it and pull back on our tab. All right, we are now hooked up between the two boards, and we are going to gently press down on our ribbon cable here. Again, we're not going real hard on this thing, just giving it a little bit of pressure, because we don't want to crimp those our copper lines in there too much. All right, we're hooked up. That is actually the mod itself. So now all we need to do is keep our fingers crossed and test it and see if this thing worked. All right, let's do it. Okay, moment of truth. Let's see what we get. Okay, it's booting. Looks a little weird. All right, so I'm seeing a double image, which means that it is putting out a 480p signal, which my monitors here cannot deal with. So I'm going to hit LR, X, and Y on my GameCube controller here, bring up my menu. You're going to turn the line up off. All right, I'm also seeing it kind of exclusively in green, which makes me think that it's probably in a component. So I'm going to switch that over to RGB, which is what my monitor is going to be for. Alright, so I'm going to go into the output settings. Yep, it is set to YPBPR, which we don't want. We want it to be set to RGB. Okay, switch it to RGB. Now we've got color. Store those settings. Okay, that actually totally works. So we have confirmed our RGB signal, which is great. I'm actually going to go hook up my capture card and see if we can actually capture the screen. Okay, so I have my capture card running, and as you can see, we do have a working signal here. So you can see that I do have the on-screen display up. Has lots of options in here. Let's see here. So we got picture settings, so we can mess with the brightness if we wanted, contrast, saturation, all that stuff. Oh yeah, I forgot we can actually do scan lines, which is kind of cool. Wouldn't really want to do this on an RGB monitor setup, but it's great that it's there. Of course, you really want to use that when you have your line doubler turned on, which I'm going to leave off for right now. All right, these are the supported modes. Okay, it looks like we have some advanced settings here as well. We do have an enhanced DVI mode, so it looks like we can set it to display 16:9 if we wanted. I'm going to leave that off for right now just because I have it set up for these RGB monitors here. But when I send this back over to Apathetic, he can use the on-screen menu however he wants to tweak it as needed. All right, I'm so stoked that like first shot this thing worked out. So now that we have determined the functionality is there for the RGB out, I will also set this up to use HDMI out. I need to test that next. But I think the next step is to actually do our case mod so that this will all sit down in the case properly and get back to it. So let's do that now.